All right, we're going to do a quick crash course in old school scripting. And so if you get stuck, maybe call up your grandma, because this is how we scripted in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. Oh, it's still around and somewhat prevalent today, though there are more scripts and shells, and then you can check a stick out. But these are kind of the grandparents of them all, and something you should be familiar with. And so let's jump in. On the left is a bash script for Linux. Forget exactly, I think the Bourne shell or the basic shell is why it's called BA, the SH is for shell. And what you ought to, and on the right is batch file. So the right is like Windows and MS-DOS. The left is Linux, and that's pretty much Unix too. If you want to go that sort of got Linux as the offspring of Unix. So what should you know about a script? Well, it's a set of commands, a list, a recipe that the processor, the operating system in this case, has processors that will execute the lines one by one. And well, what are the lines? Well, in part, the lines in a script are going to be commands in the operating system. Echo, date, who am I, mector. Same thing over here. There's an MD, that's mector in the DOS. There's echoes. There's a date, who am I, echo. So one thing you can put in script files is, well, here's commands I want to have executed, and it will execute them one after the other. But scripts are a little bit more sophisticated in the sense they can have variables defined. They can have parameters passed. That is, when you run the script, oh, by the way, where I want you to make a directory is this, or the directory I want you to name is this. That will be our case, but you can supply parameters. There are control structures, things like if statements and also looping. You can see some ifs. We'll go through what we're doing here. And so, the idea is it's a mixture of these control structures and variables, kind of like programming language, along with some of the basic commands that are just, part of the kernel or the core operating system for the computer. And it's important to be familiar with these. Probably in your career won't have to go a deep dive into these. There are other and more modern scripting kinds of languages, but you run into them regularly, and you need to be familiar with them. So no time like now to get started, at least with this review, and then I think you have a follow-up exercise. All right, so I'll give you some sample scripts. On the left is the bash script that works in Linux. I'm just going to copy this, get into my Linux box in a terminal. Oh, by the way, so I'm in my terminal, and I am in my home folder. That beneath me, if you will, are my documents, downloads, and that kind of thing. You can see I've been practicing, and I made a saved copy. But the idea is, I think this is where I ask you to put it, but just remember where you put it, because when you execute it, you need to know its name, and that might include which folder. If you know about the path command, we can work on that. So I'm just going to nano tp02 dot, and in Linux sh. I think you can also do batch bash as well, and it will understand it. And I'm just going to paste. So all that did was copy and paste that particular script. And right now it's okay, it's maybe just text and I don't understand. Well, we're going to get to that here, but I'm going to do Control X, that kind of says save it. I want to run this script, and to run the script, I think I need to use capital. Let me do, to kind of run it, even if I don't have execute privilege, just read privilege, I can put sh in front. Then I give the name of the script. Since I'm in the same folder it lives in, I don't need to put anything in front. And I'm kind of then said sample dir. Okay. Then the script ran. It popped on the screen. Oh, I created directory. And what the script does is, within documents of the user, whoever runs it, it will create a folder with whatever name they supply. Okay, so the script created that folder. We'll double check on that in a second, but it reported that it created it, and then it puts a date, who they are, and who did this into a text file called newstuff.txt that's in that directory that they just created. And then one of the last things it does is show you what's in that particular file. So if I do ls, remember I've got to go, since it's a documents, then there's this sample dir. And if I ls documents, and I should have shown you that that wasn't there before, then there is, we're in Linux /. There is that new stuff text, and I can, if I want, just to show that it's there, cat that thing. All right, so it's a script that maybe doesn't do a great deal of, wow, I didn't know you could script that, but it demonstrates a little bit. So let me walk through how it does it, and partly so you can understand, and then you are going to have to make some changes, copy this and do it somewhere else. All right, so in Bash, anything that begins with a $sign is a variable, okay? And so some variables are part of the scripting. So a variable, and you can kind of forget the braces, think of that as $1. The reason it's in braces, it lets me concatenate all this. But $1 in a script is the first parameter they put in. So when I ran this script, I put sample dir. So the first thing, you'd have the name of the script, and then a space, and then the first thing they put is the first parameter. And so $1 is that value. In my running of it lately, it was sample dir, but we want the script to be general purpose. Next time it might be, food is the name of the folder they want to create, the directory they want to create. The script is general purpose. So things with $1 in front are variables. If it's $1 and like a number, okay, then it's parameters. Parameter 0, it turns out, is the name of the script itself. We'll see that down at the bottom of this, that when I say script $0 did this, that put the name of the script in there. So I don't have to kind of, I know it's TPO. If they renamed the script, if they moved it around or something, then it's going to still do it. So $in front is a variable. Digit means it's it's one of the parameters. In Bash, the $pound is how many parameters they supplied with the script. So if we start following the logic, an if statement kind of works like this. In square braces, you put the condition. You ought to be enough programming language in Python that, okay, I can get a sense of what this is doing if I've never seen the exact syntax. It's basically saying if the number of parameters they put isn't equal to 1, then I do something. So that's kind of how if goes. Then these lines only occur not because they're indented here, though the indented shows me, but until you get an else or an fi. So an fi kind of finishes off the if, and there is no else. So the logic is, if I got something other than one parameter, I put on the screen, one parameter expected. We can see how this works. Basically, the user didn't use the script right. And then by exiting with a number, exit says stop execution. We can't do anymore. And this is just then the error code that would get reported. Presumably, if we wrote documentation, if you got error 101, you didn't enter the correct number of parameters. Notice in this case, if they put 2 parameters, it would also come into here and exit, right? So it just says, so if we get to this point, then we know we have exactly 1 parameter, okay? Then there's this, and I'm just opening up a new window so I can kind of keep this going. Then there's this statement that it says, this is when we set a variable. Notice when we set a variable, it doesn't have a $sign in front, but when we refer to it later, it does have a $sign in front. That throws me sometimes. So this is setting a new variable equal to, and in quotes, it's kind of saying, okay, it's going to be a string, and concatenate, put together this variable called home. And what I wanted to do was just echo, there are things that are called environment variables, and home is always the user's home folder. But if T-user was executing this script, we want it to go in T-user's home folder, so we don't want to hard code it with our particular home folder. We want to use something that is generic. So this says, okay, put on front their home folder, then put in /document/, and then put in the first parameter that they put in. So what newdir will be then is, the name of the directory in documents within their home folder to put that file in. This doesn't do anything. All it does is create a variable that has it. And if we echoed it back, it would show us the folder. Okay, here's some moderately advanced, excuse me, bash. Reading what this means, if newdir isn't a directory, then do something. Okay, so within the braces, and you need this extra space, kind of the square bracket, I should say. Braces or curly bracket. -D and a name says, does this directory exist? Okay, notice it's a variable, so it's saying, oh, does that particular directory that we're creating exist? The exclamation point, like in C# and I think Python, means not. So if it's not true that the directory exists, the directory doesn't exist, then we make dir the new directory. Some fancy-ish bash, we can make this part of an if statement, and by doing this, that says, oh, if something fails making the directory, then, if it works, if it's good, if it's a success making the directory, just echo back on the screen. Echo, remember, just pops on the screen whatever you have. Echo back that, oh, well, we created it. Otherwise, if there was some issue, if this did not return a 0 return code, something, then we just pop that we had some problem, creating this directory. You need to figure it out, but I'm exiting, and I'm returning an error code 102, just meaning something happened that I can't go on any further. I couldn't make the directory. Then go on from there. So notice that this, then, else, fi, that fi closes the f, kind of an if backwards. Very clever in the 70s and 80s, weren't they? So that says, okay, that's the end of the span, or the scope, if you will, of that if statement, but we're still within the scope of the then part here of if the, this is when the directory didn't exist, else means the directory did exist, so just the script then echoes back onto the screen that we're going to use the existing directory that's there. We're not going to clobber the stuff that's in it. That we just, that new directory is going to work fine. New file is going to be the name of the file we want to create. Right now, that's hard-coded to newstuff.txt that lives within newdir. So you ought to be able to kind of puzzle this by now and say, okay, I see what it's doing. It's making a string that uses this variable newdir and appends on or concatenates on a slash and newstuff.txt. And then there's 3 commands. The date command, you know what that would do. It would pop the date and time, I think, on the screen. But if I pipe it, redirect is the thing, redirect it into new file. Notice that's a greater than. That will clobber any file that is called new stuff text in this directory, whatever the file is there. The one greater than says clobber what's there, begin a new file, and squirt this in. Okay. This next statement says, kind of who am I, and it's bigger, if you will. That says append to new file the result of this. Okay, and good. So we'll have the date, we'll have whoever ran the script, and it's squirting in the file. And this echo command, then has a string. As I said, $0 means it's the script name, and push that into new file as well. Then we echo on the screen, since it's not redirected. This echo command says pop up to the user what they, I recreated new file, that I succeeded in doing what I wanted. Maybe you wouldn't provide all this feedback on a script that succeeded. And then cat $new file just says, cat shows it on the screen. And so that's why when I did it before, sh sample, sample dir, it reported that it created it. It reported it created that file. and then there were the contents. Who I was the user. If I shifted over as T user, then okay, so now that it's T user, I'd almost ask you to try this, but I mean, so notice that my home folder is home T user, because that is, so even though I'm positioned, my current working directory, the way I did this was T Schultz, because I did that SUT Schultz. If I do sh tpo2.sh, okay, it worked, but it created the folder in T user because that was the home of whoever executed the command. It was still from where I was positioned, TPO1, but who am I is T user. So that script can be executed by others. Technically, we could, if they put the SH in front, there's this way to make it executable where I wouldn't have to put the SH in front. And just other thing, if I just say, oh, let's try to do TPO2 and don't put a parameter, I go, oh, well, one parameter expected. So the thing failed, or failed safely, if you will. Failed is when you get some errors. Okay, it didn't say, oh, you entered 2, but it's kind of saying, gee, you kind of confused me here. You gave me an X and a Y, or two parameters, and I don't know what to do with that. All right, so a little bit of bash scripting. You get to use that as a model and make some changes where it makes it generic to where it's not always new stuff. .txt, it's a file name that the user adds on. So you're going to write a 2-parameter script that does something very similar. Well, that's all fine and dandy. Let's, you might say bat files are exactly the same except for they're different. So this is a bat file. It does exactly the same thing. It's almost close enough to so yeah, but it's just enough different, or there are some significant differences, and it can make you crazy sometimes if you are shifting a lot between one and the other. So I'm setting up for newer style scripting. Wouldn't it be nice if there was one scripting language that worked on every kind of computer? And yes, it would be. And among the many answers, and one we're going to look at is PowerShell. Not Windows PowerShell, but what's called PowerShell Core. We'll look at that in the future. And if it works on a Windows box, it'll work on a Mac box, it'll work on a Linux box, and no remembering some of these subtleties. But back to bat scripting. Bat file for batch file. MS-DOS, the principle is the same. Oh, I copied the text. I'm using Notepad in the GUI. I could have, I don't know if there's a command line editor built in. You can get Nano for Windows, but I'm just going to save since it's the first time it's saving as, and I want to be sure I save this in the same place. To kind of get to my home folder through the GUI, I've got to go to C, Users, T Schultz. This is my home folder that's above this. We're changing it as to a bat file, so I think if you don't pull down and say all files in Notepad, it puts .txt on the end, so I'm going to call this TPO2 bat. All right, and so it's a bat file. Let's go kind of, and easiest to execute them from the command line. You can try executing them just by double-clicking and right-clicking. The problem is it's going to open up a command window, and when the bat file is done, it's going to close that command window, so you can't see what's there. Sometimes we'll put a pause or something at the end, so it'll kind of hold the command window open for a while, but we can edit it with Notepad, but let's execute it in command mode so we don't have to worry about that pause. So we see that that TPO2 bat is there. I think since it's a bat file, we don't even okay. does the same thing. We don't have to put .bat. .bat is understood, though, gee, it's executable, and I think you can make it so in Linux you don't have to put the .sh on. But the important thing, it's a text file, did the same thing. Created T-Schultz document sampler, recreated this file called new stuff, what's the date, who was I, and who did it, and we could use the GUI to kind of go around and there's sampler, there's new stuff.txt, and so it really did it. Okay, so let's walk through a little bit about how it did it. We don't need that. What we want to do is look at this. So similar idea, but different. In bat files, variables begin and sometimes are surrounded with percents. Okay, so this %1 is about the first parameter that got put in. %2 is the second parameter that got put in. %0 is the name of the script file itself. So instead of $ something, % something. All right, so that's one little different. Instead of home, it's an environmental variable. You have a bunch of them that are that the system's helping to keep track of. We'll probably talk about them, and I think you read about them and that kind of thing. So anyway, yeah. So there's this variable. So to refer to it, you need % in front and % in back, but home path. It remembers for every user, and so that just says, okay, where does this person's home path going to be? All right. So in a bat file, this @echo off, if you don't put that, every command in the bat file gets put on the screen, and that's good sometimes for debugging, but it'll put the if statement on, it'll put that it's going to echo this, then it echoes it, and so kind of for a bat file that you want to run, you probably don't want all that there. So that echo off just says, don't put your steps on the screen, just put on the screen the things I explicitly asked to echo. All right. In bat files, there isn't a variable that tells you the number of parameters. Okay, I think as an oversight, because it's really handy. So we have a slightly different logic. So this one, this if statement here. Oh, by the way you start the what do I want to do? If it's true, you put a paren and it goes to the closed paren. So that's the scope of the if statement being true. And you can see down here it gets a little bit convoluted. And then if you, so here's an if, that closes the true part, then you say else, and then the parens embrace what you want to have done on the else part. And so there's no fi, it's just the closing paren, either the closing paren for the else if you have it, or just the closing paren of the if. And if the next thing's not an else, then it understands that we're done. So this is how you basically ask, is saying if it's true that whatever they put in for the first parameter is nothing, okay, and that's sort of the little kludge that you just learn, that is basically, if I embrace it, if what I got was the same thing that is nothing, then we execute, or echo back, oh, we expected one parameter like before, because if we didn't get a first parameter, then something's wrong. Okay, and to actually exit, then you put actually do /b in front of it. Otherwise, exit just exits out of this particular, the scope, if you will, and continues on down here. But exit break is what the /b says. We're all done. So if we didn't get a one parameter, we did. Here's where it gets a little fancy. I'm saying if it's not true, then that the second parameter is nothing, that is, they gave us two or more parameters, then we still say one parameter expected, right? So this one basically says, if they gave us something for the second parameter, we're going to be confused. So, given the same error code and same message, you might ask about ORs in here. ORs are a little bit difficult to work out in batch files. Basically, you use consecutive ifs. So this is kind of like if one was nothing or two was something, but we do it in terms of two if statements. But basically, at this point, we know we've got exactly one parameter. In a bat file, you just don't say the variable that you want to set, that you're defining. It has the set keyword. So this says, okay, we want to define a new variable. The concatenation works out a little easier, and that's why these things are embraced in percent. But this says put the home path in front, put a backslash because it's Windows, documents backslash, and then put the parameter that they put in. Checking for if something exists. Well, this says if it doesn't exist, this path that we're going to be calling the do directory, and if it doesn't exist, then we need to make the directory. The logic is a little bit different. We try to make the directory, then we check if we got an error. The bash was, I don't know if it's a little more elegant. This one, it kind of said if make dir, so if it worked, this one says try it, and if the error level was 0, then we know that it made it fine, and since it didn't exist before, everything's good. That's when we echo that, oh, we created it. Otherwise, something happened here. We don't know what, but we're exiting our, first there was an error creating it, then we're exiting and spitting back this error code 102. And back is the else for if that did exist, we'll just echo back, we're going to use the directory that's already there. So logic is the same as in the bash script, a little bit different. You kind of got to match up the parens and that kind of thing. Then we create a variable that's actually the fully qualified name, maybe not fully qualified, it doesn't have the drive letter in front, but it's got the home folder and the directory and new stuff.txt. Here's how you get a date. You just do date in Windows. It'll tell you the date, but then allow you to enter a new date. So date/t just says report the date and go. The greater than kind of works. That pipes it into whatever the name of this thing is and recreates it, the one greater than. The two greater one says append to what's there with who am I, and this one is echoing this. We didn't have to put it all in quotes, and then we're going to append that to new file, and then we echo to the user, oh, what we did was create this, and then in DOS or Windows bat file, it's the type command that gets it to go to screen. So if I go back here and just kind of, let's go look at this again. When I said TPO2 sample dir, it told me it created it. It told me that it recreated this file, and here are the contents. Notice here, oh, I didn't see a time. So if I executed it now, it would recreate it, but I could have showed the time. The whole day hasn't gone by, so it's going to look the same. But if I did execute that same thing again, I didn't demonstrate this when I was in this, but in this case, it's saying using existing directory. Okay, and if I try to do this, don't give it anything. Oh, I'm sorry. If I try to do this, there it is. It was below the thing. I said, oh, wait a minute, that's where I did this. But if I try to do it and I don't give a parameter, it does the right thing and say, well, wait a minute, I kind of, it's kind of funny. I guess the way I've got this, it's kind of going off. And if I give two parameters, it's saying, no, I expected one parameter. All right, so old school scripting, you got a little bit to do about sort of modeling, what you're doing, and going from there. You'll probably see bat files and bash files in your career somewhere, maybe if you do much system admin, but they are sort of maybe a legacy way to go, but they send the groundwork for everything that was to come. All right, so till next time, ta-ta.